So let's get started, man. Well, first of all, I've heard a lot about you, Alfonso. It's great to have you. And I just wish that I had your experience at the same age, because you're on the young side and you've already done a lot. It's very impressive, and so I'm excited to dig in more with you on Nowports.
No, thanks, Brian, for inviting me. I feel so honored. I think we didn't know each other, but we had a lot of common connections and friends, and probably I've seen what you have created from the book and Latitude, etc. So happy to be here and only share a little bit of what we've been doing the last 3 years.
Awesome. Yeah, I think we connected on WhatsApp, and I think you might have been in San Francisco, and we miss each other. But well, now here we are, and especially if you come to Mexico, you know Mexico City, you know where to find me. So. Listen, you and Max started Nowports back in 2018 now. So talk a little bit about exactly the opportunity that you saw at that time, and how did you actually come to discover the opportunity?
Totally. I mean, when we talk about why we started Nowports and when we started, I was at college, still just on my first year of college. And there was an interesting thing that matched between Max and I, right? On one side, we were software developers. We were geeks, right? We just like doing software apps and mobile applications, etc. since we were relatively young. And on the other side, Max worked for a traditional logistics company for more than 2 years. He's from Uruguay. He emigrated from Uruguay to the US and worked in a traditional logistics company. And my family had a traditional logistics business for more than 20 years in Mexico. So we both had two things that we kind of knew and liked, which was software development and logistics. And while we met at Stanford, we just were talking, doing different projects like freelancers for people in Mexico and Uruguay, and we started doing a side business until we said hey, we really want to make this a real business and just revolutionize the logistics industry, which has been the same for more than 70 years, right? And that's how we started, just giving visibility to businesses. To be honest, even though we say that we started at 2018, for me, my official year, it's 2019, because when we quit Stanford and we quit the company where we were working on, etc. It was December 2018, right? So it's officially 2018, but our story launched on the beginning of 2019, right?
So you left Stanford then?
Yeah. Well, it's a good story because I didn't left Stanford College. I left Stanford Designership College, which is created by Esther Wojcicki. It's also a college inside of Stanford, but it's just a new way of teaching and education, etc. Really interesting experience. It was more Montessori based, to call it on that way.
Got it. How does your parents feel about you dropping out of school?
No, good. It was the second time I dropped out of school because I also dropped out of school in Mexico, right? I started doing college in Mexico, but I just went through an existential crisis of I didn't know if I wanted to be a software developer because I already knew how to code and I was studying it. I don't know. There was a lot of ego in my body at that time, but they always supported me. The first time I left college in Mexico to emigrate to the US, I think they just did a lot of effort for me to move, to have an apartment there, lovely with roomies, etc. And we were a medium-class family at that time, and to be honest, I kind of respected a lot their effort of just helping me out to move, right?
That's amazing. It's great to have that family support. It's crucial. And do you think that the challenges in the current education system, given that you already became a software engineer before you went to school, how do you see the big gaps in education in Latin America, and how can we increase the volume of software engineers? And what are your thoughts on that? Because that's a huge bottleneck for LATAM to kind of elevate to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, I really agree with what you're saying, because when I entered college, it was after 6 years that I was coding, right? So I knew how to do software development, just mobile apps. Obviously, I was not an expert, but I knew how to do them, right? And I was just launching personal projects and game modifications, etc. And my first months at college were really disappointing because I was not coding at all. I was studying software engineer, but I was not coding. And I even couldn't use the computer at the classroom, right? And that was a really big challenge for me because I was really used to, I don't know, Google answers for coding issues, right? Or for bugs, etc. And I couldn't use that at college. So I said like, okay, if this is the real software engineering life, I want to like test it for 6 months at least. So that's why I dropped out the first time of college in Mexico. I said like, if I will do this the next 20 years of my life, I want to make sure on a professional life, it looked like the way I imagined it, right? So that's why I dropped out. And I think like just the educational system, not only in Latin America, but worldwide, has a lot of gaps because software engineering moves really, really fast, right? Like, I don't know, it's been 2 years since I don't code, and I just feel like I cannot code anymore because there are new languages, new cell phones, new computers. You know, there's a lot about Web3 and blockchain, and 2 years ago, we didn't have too much development of that, right? So I just think it moves too fast and college and university move too slow, maybe. That's the big challenge that we have.
Well, let's add on to that and, talk about another industry that's a bit antiquated and, unable to kind of adapt to the, the new things and something that you're shifting in the direction of leveraging technology. And, let's talk about your business model at Nowports.
Totally.
In comparison to how the shipping segment operated before you got here.
Yes. So as I said, my family had a logistics business for more than 20 years, right? So since I was really, really young, I was used to go to their office and just see how things work, right? And most of the time, like, it was just a lot of papers on every desk and a lot of email transactions between my mom and my parent and my dad to their clients, And when I started developing and doing software, I said like, oh my God, it's been the same for the last 70 years. Like it's just a lot of more than 16 documents per container that you're moving, more than 80 emails, more than 14 phone calls. You basically never know where is your cargo, right? So you need to guess and do some guesses of when it's arriving, etc. So we launched Nowports to be the first digital software platform to manage your whole supply chain, right? And basically, customers at Nowports can see where is their cargo in real time, get automated reports, and save more than 16 hours per week just on things that they made on Excel, on manual reports, etc. before. And I think that that's just like the way we started. Like we want to digitize this full process of importing or exporting a container. And after that, we just, and I'm happy to dive in the next few minutes about that, but we just started cross-selling these customers other solutions that we saw, not only on logistics, but on their whole supply chain, right? Like financing, insurance, international payments, etc. And right now, that's why Nowports is becoming like the operating system for supply chain and not just the logistic platform, right?
No, that makes sense. Can you give a little bit of color on the kind of the size of the business and in terms of clients and countries of operation?
So right now, as you said, we started at 2018, but officially at the beginning of 2019, it was just Max and I. And after that, we went into Y Combinator. We raised $8.6 million. That was more than 3 years ago. And we recently raised more than $150 million from SoftBank. The company was valued at $1.1 billion. And we have around 700 full-time employees across 12 different countries, including major economies in Latin America like Brazil, Mexico, Chile, Colombia, Uruguay, etc. And we serve a little bit more of 4,000 different customers, most of them medium and big enterprises. That operate in multiple countries, import more than 10 or 15 containers every single month. And also what we do now is beyond Latin America, right? We recently opened an office in China, in Madrid, in Spain, and about to launch Nigeria and Africa. So we want to revolutionize all logistics process across developing countries or regions.
Just out of curiosity, as I mentioned, it's very impressive what you've been able to do in such a short amount of time. Not only with the business, but the fact that you're in your kind of your mid-20s here.
Still early 20s. 23. I was 19 when we started Nowports.
So how is it building like an executive team and building a company? Because I imagine you're bringing on people. You probably have people who are reporting to you that might be twice as old as you. I'm just guessing. How has that been to kind of level up your leadership skills? And clearly you're very bright and talented. what has been the kind of the biggest growth opportunity for you as you learn about scaling such a large organization that's not only a large organization in Latin America, but a global organization?
Totally. Obviously, when we talk about scaling a company, in my opinion, one of the main challenges is just to keep a good culture. And a good culture is not just like passing a good time, which is something that we love to do. It's actually one of our values. Like, we enjoy what we do, right? But it's also just growing as a leader. Normally like companies grow in this way, and you as a leader tend to grow in this way, right? So the challenge is to always like just upscale yourself and fire yourself from the jobs that you're used to do. So when we started Nowports, I was really used to code, right? And I was good during the platform and a lot of that, but we needed to pitch to investors, we needed to sell to customers, and that was my first transition, right? Like from coding to selling to investors and customers. And now it's just about having a high performance leadership team that is not actually just like good individuals with good performance and experience, but actually that they work well together with each other, right? And for that, I think you need a lot of vulnerability as a leader to understand that you need to grow every single day and just challenge yourself on your thinkings, rebuild yourself, etc. Right? I think sometimes it's better to unlearn some things than to learn things, and just there's a lot of experience that people can bring to the company to empower our vision and just take it global and move faster and actually make a better impact for customers that need to import and export. And I think that the word is just vulnerability. I spend a lot of time on coaching and different like just guidance, other CEOs, etc., to learn about experience and trying to just catch up between the age that I have and the experience that I need to have as a leader in order to lead Nowports to be a global company or a public company in the next few years, right?
Is there any particular person that's really just helped you level up?
It's a good question. I would say there are multiples, but there's a coach that I work really close to that is called Tim Porterhouse. He's based in the US. And the last few months while we were at the transition from, just to give a little bit of context, we've raised 3 rounds in less than 12 months, right? So that was a really big challenge for the business because we went from being a seed stage startup to a Series C startup in less than 12 months, right? So I don't know if I don't know if it was random or something like that, but I started working with Tim just when we raised our Series A, right? So he saw the challenge of Series A to Series C, and we just started thinking more about strategy and not only about executing, right? Because execution is good, but when you scale up as a company, you need to know what's going to be your move in the next 4 quarters, not only in the next 2 weeks, etc., right? And obviously other founders too, just like John Levy, that it's an investor at Investo, and he previously co-founded Green. He helped it a lot. I don't know, Manolo Atala from Fairplay, Ricardo Weather from Justo, just a lot of different founders that I think had a previous experience as leaders and as co-founders that can give you a specific advice on different topics.
No, that's great. People that have been there. Yeah, I had lunch with Jonathan just 2 days ago. So fantastic group you're surrounding yourself with. Now let's. You mentioned 3 rounds in 1 year. Let's kind of double click on that. What was the rationale there? You've raised over $240 million since inception. A, B, C. You're kind of going through the alphabet pretty quickly. Why raise rounds with so little time in between them?
It's a good topic to discuss about, because what happened with Nowports is that when we just started as a company, like at the beginning of 2019, we decided to went to Y Combinator. We raised $8.6 million, and it was just Max and I at the company at that time, right? Obviously, when we enter YC, we hire our first profiles, like most of them focus on growth, like marketing and outbound sales, and also a culture leader, right? So those were our first 3 hires and founding team, to call it in that way. And we raised $8.6 million, and I think we had too much capital, but we didn't know how to execute because we were too early, right? Like we just started the company when we raised that capital. So at some point, we needed to catch up. We needed a lot of time to catch up in terms of team building, of go-to-market, of product, etc. And we spent the next 24 months just like trying to dominate how do we execute the Nowports vision, right? Like how do we digital logistics? How do we actually sell to big enterprises, which are the ones that need the most, need Nowports the most, etc. So I'm saying that because we raised and we went into a chat, just like a cave, and started working from there all the time, right? And we were not public even, like we were not. Now you can see me on LinkedIn and Twitter and all of that, but at that time I was just trying to understand how Nowports worked. After 24 months, I think it was time not only for Nowports to grow, but actually to diversify, right? Like we wanted to grow in terms of logistics. And this was, just to give more context, this was at 2021, right? So mid-2021, we said like, okay, now we have a great team, we have a great culture, a great product, and customers actually love what we're doing. Let's expand. So we expanded geographically to a lot of other countries. At that time, we just operated in Mexico and Chile, and now we operate in 12 different countries, right? So we expanded to 10 new countries in less than 12 months. To 10 new countries in less than 12 months. And actually, we launched new products like inventory financing, international payments, insurance, which I'm happy to talk about that in the next few minutes. But that's why we raised our Series A, right? Which was a $24 million Series A led by Moro Capital, which is like the VC of Santander, one of the biggest banks operating in Latin America. And that was specifically to launch our inventory financing product, the first like new product that we launched, and to expand into new countries. And after that, I think we dominated like just exponentiality. Like we started acquiring more than 400 customers every single month. We now like didn't depend on Mexico, and we had other countries that bring in actually like really good revenue, etc. Just to give you an idea, now Mexico is around 30% of our revenue, and we have the other ones distributed, which is really good in terms of growth and just like how you mature as a company, right? So that's why we raised then $60 million less than 6 months after that, and we raised $100 million, $150 million this summer of 2022, right?
You know, you mentioned 10 countries in 12 months. What makes LATAM's international supply chain scenario unique in comparison to the other regions? You know, I mean, you've also, outside of LATAM, it sounds like you're expanding. So how do you see the difference between Latin American countries that Nowports is in today and, you know, just across the world in your experience? I'm sure every country has a new challenge or a different challenge, or do they have similar, you know, kind of challenges or common, logistics problems that you have to solve?
Totally. Well, when we talk about logistics, Brian, I just think like most of the companies have the same problem, but the way you solve it is really different, right? Because you depend on local issues like local connectivity, I don't know, customs, regulation, government, etc. So most of the customers that want to move cargo, they want visibility of their cargo, of their operations, automation, access to financing, which is what we do, automated insurance. You know, like the challenges are the same globally because logistics is kind of like a global topic in every single company, but the way you solve it is really different. So that's why every time we open a new market, we have 100% local team there, right? And we try to empower. If we are opening Brazil, we just bring people that has previous experience managing logistics issues at that region, so we can build like custom products there and just scale on those specific regions and feel like a regional company and not just like Nowports Global, right? And that includes just a lot of changes in your branding, in your image, in the way you operate, the way you communicate your product, etc.
I'm curious because, you know, when the pandemic hit, you guys are a pretty new company. And, you know, I think that you hadn't even raised your Series A, if I'm not mistaken. And is that right?
Yeah. We raised the Series A 1 year after the pandemic started.
Okay. Because basically, if you look backwards, the pandemic, what resulted from the pandemic in terms of tech is either it was tailwinds, headwinds, or neutral. And so how would you say, how did it change the way Nowports operated or the demand for its services?
No, for sure. I will talk about internally first, because I think that was a really big challenge. Obviously, our go-to-market changed and a lot of things of our product changed. But the biggest challenge that we had was around the team and our culture, right? Because when we left because of the pandemic to our houses, we were just like 60 persons at the company. And right now we are 700, right? So it was a 10x growth in terms of team. And we were really careful and cautious about how our culture was shaping while we were remote, right? Because obviously you don't see each other at the coffee break. You don't see each other, I don't know, from one desk to another. So you can start creating silos as a company. And we were really young at that time. And we just operated in Monterrey. Everyone went to the office. Monterrey is in Mexico. Everyone went to the office every day. And when the pandemic started, that changed, right? So we started doing a lot of things around culture, just like remote all hands, remote coffee breaks, etc. So we people, and mostly like the new people at the company, understood how we wanted to create a global company that actually you enjoy working for, right? So that was the first thing, just like being really cautious about culture. And the other thing is about strategy. When the pandemic started, we were obviously wondering, just as any other company, if we should stop deploying capital, like hiring and launching new products, new geographies, etc., or if we should continue, right, and just be more aggressive. And our thought was that logistics was something that like couldn't stop, right? Because 90% of what you see around yourself was once in a shipping container, right? So we were like, okay, this industry is not going to stop, but we wanted to know how it was going to change, right? So the way it changed is that a lot of industries just stopped like working, but others exploded, right? Like automotive stopped for a few months and then exploded. Technology-based exploded while the pandemic had started, etc. And we went on that way, like just doing some big bets per industry, per customer size, and actually per routes, right? Like trade lines that we work on. Mainly, we are an Asia to Latin America company. And we decided to attack. To be honest, like the pandemic was a really good season for us because a lot of competitors just decided to be more cautious and more conservative. And we actually decided to grow and to expand into new countries, etc. And in retrospective, it was a big bet because we didn't have too much capital. But actually, we had a good way of path to profitability at that time. And that's why we decided to just bet a lot on our growth, right?
I saw a tweet where you kind of stated that you've got to always be on the offensive, and I just wanted to get your perspective on the current kind of market downturn, if that's still relevant, and given that things have kind of changed probably since then. So what's your take on that, and are you still maintaining and always on the offensive?
Yeah, I mean, I was just talking a little bit about this with some other founders yesterday at a dinner. And I think the mentality should always be on offensive because you should have a hurry of like expanding your vision, right? Like, and aggressiveness, it's not only like I have capital, I will deploy it, but actually it's being more innovative on your strategies. It's trying to take more customers with less capital. So with this current market, I feel like I have the same mentality of aggressiveness, but I just think we need to be more cautious about, I don't know, path to profitability, unit economics, how every single market is behaving, and not only like the big countries where we operate, and taking gain of like some advantages or opportunities that we can see, right? But I do think that even like small startups should, or earlier stage startups should focus on doing some big bets and being aggressive on expanding their vision, even though they don't have that much capital at that time. I just feel really related to when we were at the pandemic and we just had like 4 months of runway, 3 months of runway, and we decided to keep growing in order to reach more customers and just move more containers, which was our main KPI at that time. And the last thing I want to say is, and you know more than of this than me, but there's a lot of capital on the sidelines. I just think like investors are being more cautious about which startups they decide to invest, but good startups with great business models and unit economics will still get funded, right? That's a little bit of my reading of the current market, but we'd love to actually get your insight here.
Well, I think there's an important distinction you made because you said offensive, but you also used good unit economics in the same sentence, right? Which some founders mistakenly think that offensive means just kind of going wild and spending money, to get market share. So I tend to agree with you. I think that particularly when you're small, I'm going to use maybe a freight analogy here. Like if you're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean and you're a freight ship, it's hard for you to turn around slowly, right? But if you're a speedboat and you're tiny and you've got an ability to kind of, stop on a dime and then shift directions. So being small enables you to be more on the offensive because you can be faster, and velocity is a huge competitive advantage for early stage startups.
For sure. And actually, if like most of our competitors are big international firms, right? Like just like Maersk, Kuehne+Nagel, Hapag-Lloyd, they've been in the market for more than 70 or 80 years sometimes. Actually, there's a competitor that has been more than 200 years in the market. And they only had way more capital than us at the seed round, but actually today on the Series C, right? And our only like real advantage is speed and understanding the customer needs. Hearing them, like being so near of the customer that we can actually build products that are useful for them and can empower them to grow as companies, right?
Yeah, it's a massive competitive advantage. And so I think that to your point, the being on the offensive, I agree with you. I think that pretty much no startup should be on the defensive because you're trying to win and you're trying to overtake an existing incumbent. If you're going after a big market, that means there's a ton of incumbents there. They're traditional businesses most likely. And so, I don't think there's room for anyone that's a startup to be on the defensive. Of course, the only caveat there is, you need to be alive, you need to stay alive, and you need to not die. And if you're in a position where the funding cycle hasn't lined up with, your kind of cash position, then you obviously need to probably be more protective over, to make sure you've got a heartbeat moving forward. But
I agree 100%.
You mentioned plans for an IPO, just, casually in passing here. And so how do you think about that? What are the steps that you think about taking? It's a big jump from the private to the public markets. What's your thought process there?
Yeah, no, for sure. And actually, Brian, since we started Nowports, we have always talked about being a public company, but it's not necessarily just like the IPO, or I think IPO is just another stage of a company, and it's not like the goal. But when we talk about like being public or not, I just think it's like a decision that we will make at that time, depending on the market, on the company, on the goals that we have, etc. But we want to have like the choice, like we want to grow as a company. We want to be $100 billion business that actually transforms how companies operate their supply chain. And if that includes like being public or being like, basically like listed on NASDAQ or another firm, I think that's a good choice. But I don't know. It will depend at the time on how we decide to navigate waters at that time.
You were, once commenting on Sundar Pichai's masterclass at Stanford, for those that don't know, running things over at Alphabet, the Google kind of network, about how a lot of scaling is about making sure you preserve the good things you had in the early days. And that gets harder as the company becomes bigger. This applies obviously to Google, but it also applies to Nowports. So how do you go about maintaining the good things as your startup grows?
That's a good point. I think like the first days, obviously it's really easy to see each other at the office, right? And the way you behave, it's how your values are written, right? Like actually it's not useful to have a list of values and people just reading them, but acting on another way. And so at the early days, I think that's the most important thing, like being present and being just like representing the values that you want to create as a company and as a culture. But as you scale, and now that we are more than 700 full-time employees across more than 10 different offices, actually 12, I think you need to scale up also your culture, right? And that includes having clear values, clear procedures, clear systems that actually enable everyone to just express themselves of how they are feeling about the company. How do you think you can improve on every single point or team, right? And also having real-time ambassadors, not only of the early days, because we have our founding team that is still working at Nowports, and we are so proud of that because they just express how the first days were and what was our focus as a company on our culture, etc. But also having new ambassadors, because something that I like about Sundar is that he mentions a lot that it's important to have the things of the first days, but actually grow them, right? Because you need to start adding topics and adding new strategies in order to have a good global culture and not just a regional culture of the house where you started and that was your first office, right? So I like that you need to keep the good things, but also include new ones, right? Culture should be not replaced, but grown. And that's something that I just admire a lot of Google, and we try to do on Nowports, which is the Nowports way. The Nowports way, it's our culture, and it's something that hopefully changing every single day for the better.
Yeah, it's a living organism, right? The moment that your culture stops evolving, you stop evolving as a company. Well, I've heard a lot about culture and values from you today. I'm just curious, how do you go about manifesting, going from just like, these are our values, they're frases bonitas en la pared, to manifesting that on a day-to-day so that people really embrace it and it's not just a kind of aspirational thing?
Yeah, it starts as you as founder, in my opinion, right? I think when you say like, we enjoy what we do, but actually the founder doesn't show up at the office or doesn't pass time with customers, it's not, spending time working on the new product, etc. It doesn't reflect that you actually enjoy it. You're just saying it, but your daily basis doesn't look on that way. And I think that should be like on every single value, right? Like being respectful with each other. We trust, one of our values is we trust people, right? Like we just trust our team, and I trust the one that is just joining the company, and I trust the CEO, I trust Max. We just trust each other, and that is reflected on every single decision that you take as a company. I just think like that every Nowporter can take different decisions, tough decisions with customers, with money, with unit economics, depending on the situation. They just don't need to go with every single manager to get an approval. We just trust that people can take better decisions than just the founder or something like that. So I think the best way to live the values is just to actually reflect them on every single decision that you do as a founder, but also as a team, right?
Yeah, at Latitude, we call them virtues because it's kind of behaviors versus, some ideas, which I really liked. We borrowed from, Ben Horowitz over at Andreessen in his book, his recent book about company culture. I wanted to double click on one thing that you'd mentioned because, I'm thinking a little bit about some of the challenges. I mean, I love Latin America. I moved to Mexico. I'm here, super feliz in Ciudad de Mexico.
I saw that. I saw all the photos of your luggage going to Mexico.
Yeah. So listen, I love it here. I've lived in Latin America for a few decades, off and on in, Colombia, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina. And one of the challenges is that by default, like trust is hard to just, you don't start with trust a lot of times because, tema de desconfianza. So how do you institute that? I mean, besides practicing it yourself and giving people, the trust, which demonstrates that you want other people to kind of accelerate trust. How do you create an organization that just accelerates the speed of trust and helps other people really kind of fall in and practice that same line of thinking?
For sure. I think, when we talk about trust, a lot of the time, we just think that it's like trust from, Poncho to Brian, right? But we need to understand that trust is from the employer to the organization and from the organization to the employer. To the employee, right? So the way we try to encourage it on a daily basis is that if you work at Nowports, on real time, how much revenue we're making, how much containers we are moving, how many customers we have acquired today, and actually what's our next move. There's a lot of confidentiality things that we share internally at the company. And that's just because we trust each other. And if you as an employee see that on the company, you just start actually behaving on the same way, and you start empowering your own team to take bigger decisions, just riskier decisions, etc. Right? So I don't know. It's a bilateral thing that I just like the company to encourage and to empower every single person to take decisions. But also, it should be just again, reflected on the daily basis. taking lunches with the team and understanding how we are not moving faster because of lack of trust, etc., and how we can implement processes that solve those issues, right, as we scale.
Who is the primary person that has imparted this wisdom on you? Because, you know, for someone so young, you're light years ahead of most people that are twice your age. So who is the greatest, who's the greatest influence that's, you know, helped you in terms of how you lead or, you know, how you think?
First of all, thank you. Thank you on that. I really appreciate it. But, you know, I think I just try to learn a lot from every single person I pass time with, right? And including my parents, right? So a lot of my educational model was just Montessori. It wasn't called Montessori officially, but when I was like 23 years old, I learned that maybe the name to reflect that it's Montessori. So I don't know. When I was a kid, I could take a lot of decisions, and that's reflected on when I dropped out of school, right, and decided to go to another city, another country, and just like start from zero as an immigrant, right? So I could take a lot of decisions, and then I met Esther Wojcicki, which Google was founded on her garage. She received me in the U.S., helping me to land my first job, etc. And she was really, really just like. Actually, she implemented a lot of culture on Google, and I think she gave me a lot of thoughts on leadership, how we should behave as leaders, and be really vulnerable on every single decision that we make.
Well, listen, you're on the right path. Really excited to to see the evolution, and it's early days for Nowports, but given the global opportunity, the size of the market, the traction you have, in terms of customers and global footprint in a short amount of time, very confident that you're going to continue to, make waves, here in LATAM and globally. So congrats on what you've been able to do so far. And, usually I say vamos LATAM, but it sounds like vamos mundo. Vamos al...
No, Brian, just before finishing, to be honest, just wanted to say again, I said at the beginning of the podcast, but I'm a huge fan of this type of podcast and of Latitude, of course, and all the work you have done in Latin America. So thanks for inviting me. I hope I can be here once we are on the next step and share more about our experience.
Well, let's make a pact when you go public, the small little podcaster here in La Esquina del Mundo aquí in mi apartamentico would love to receive you and hear more about the journeys and hopefully you can share more about the lessons that you've learned, because I'm sure at the velocity that you're learning, given you're kind of thrust into running a 700 person company at 23 years old, you're going to be able to definitely be an incredible resource for the next generation of founders. And so hopefully you'll give back. I'm sure you will. And I would love to hear more about your journey as things evolve.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks, Ryan.
All right. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.